Way back at the tail end of the Neanderthal era, Thorn is getting a fire going in a cave so his family can stay warm for the night. Once the kids drift off, Thorn and his pregnant wife Hara sneak away into a corner for some private time. The next morning, Thorn heads out to a pond to scavenge for shellfish. While trying to scale some rocks, he loses his footing and takes a nasty fall. He's pretty banged up, but luckily, he's still alive. Back at the cave, Thorn develops a persistent cough, and Hara's really worried about his internal bruising. By the next day, the coughing hasn't stopped, but he pushes himself to keep hunting for food. Eventually, his body gives out, and Hara has to help him back to the cave. For the rest of the day, Thorn is shaking with a fever. His family tries to give him herbal remedies, but nothing seems to work. Since his chest is still heavily bruised, Hara decides to drain some of the fluid by making a small cut. She covers the wound with fresh herbs, which finally seems to settle Thorn down. While Thorn is recovering, Hara starts thinking about their survival. She begins teaching their daughter Lark how to start a fire. It takes a few tries, but Lark finally gets it. An excited Lark runs back to show her dad what she did, only to find out that her baby brother has passed away. Thorn manages to pull himself out of bed to bury the baby, while Hara is completely heartbroken.
That night, Hara is still in shock. Thorn makes some paint from plants and guides Hara's hand to leave a print on the cave wall as a memento. A few days later, Hara's water breaks while she's out for a walk. Lark helps her back to the cave, but Thorn makes Lark wait outside while Hara goes into labor. A healthy baby is born, but the delivery leaves Hara extremely weak. As the days go by, she just doesn't get better. Sadly, Hara passes away, and Thorn buries her right next to their baby. That night, he adds his own handprint to the wall. Sometime later, Thorn carves a small flute to play for the kids. After thinking it over, he gives Hara's necklace to Lark. While out looking for food, they're shocked to see a group of other humans nearby. They hide and wait for them to leave, but by nightfall, the strangers are still there. Thorn decides it's time to move and gathers the kids to leave. The next day, they realize they're being followed and try to pick up the pace. A few mornings later, Thorn wakes up to someone poking his shoulder. It's the strangers. He quickly wakes the kids so they can make a run for it. But it's too late. The men surround them. Thorn rushes to protect his children, terrified because he doesn't speak their language. Thorn is a Neanderthal, while these people are Homo sapiens.
One of the men speaks softly and gestures to show he's offering food. Thorn and Lark try the dried meat and finally realize these people aren't a threat. When the group leaves, Lark wants to follow them. After a moment of hesitation, Thorn agrees. When the group stops to set up camp, Thorn feels a bit out of place, so he pulls out his flute to break the ice. The others are fascinated and ask him to teach them. Everyone loves the music, and Thorn finally starts to feel welcome. A few days later, they reach a Homo sapiens village. The locals are happy to take Thorn and his family in. They settle in quickly, and Thorn even enjoys playing with the village kids. Once Lark is old enough, she marries the man who first rescued them. Thorn and the other parents give their blessing, and the whole village celebrates. Fast forward to 2025. Claire and her coworker Greg are trying to hook up, but things aren't exactly clicking. They realize they're both way too drunk and decide to call it a night. Greg wants to crash there, but Claire kicks him out. When he asks if they can try again another time, she shuts him down and pretends she has to get to work. Once he's gone, she just takes care of herself.
The next morning at Princeton, Claire gets to work. She's an anthropologist studying an ancient Neanderthal skeleton. Greg texts her, but she ignores him. During lunch, she spots Greg and takes a detour just to avoid him. She calls her mom and talks about how hyped she is for this job. This research could be a career changer, maybe even leading to a cure for cancer. That evening, she finally sends Greg a very casual, neutral text back. A while later, Claire is headed to work when her mom calls, but she lets it go to voicemail. Greg texts her to ask about the job, and she happily chats with him for a bit. Her mother calls again, and this time she picks up. She's hit with the devastating news that her mom has cancer and doesn't have much time left. Claire ends up having a total breakdown in the hallway. That night, she goes to a party and runs into Greg. They head back to his place, and this time things go much better in the bedroom. But as soon as it's over, Claire has to bolt because she's got an early flight to Vancouver. The next day, she arrives at her mom's house feeling completely helpless.
They head to the hospital together for treatment. That evening, she video calls Greg. Even though it's the middle of the night for him, he's happy to listen. She tries to keep things light, but eventually she loses it and tells him her mother is dying. He does his best to comfort her. Back at work, Claire can't focus. Her mom keeps calling, and she promises to visit again over the weekend. Later, she meets up with Greg. After some more fun, she drops the bombshell that she might have to quit her job to be with her mom. She's torn apart by the idea of walking away from a project that could change the world. An hour later, she meets with the dean and officially resigns. She leaves the country, only sending Greg a quick text. On the plane, she can't stop crying. A few days later, she calls Greg for support. Her mom is doing really poorly, and Claire is starting to think she'll never move back to the States. She's worried their relationship won't last, but Greg is still hopeful.
Eventually, Claire's mother passes away. She calls Greg again, but the next day when she tries to reach him, he's busy with work and can't talk. He calls her back later, but then she's the one who's too busy. That evening, she texts him while he's out with friends, leaving him feeling conflicted. Weeks later, they're on a video call, and Claire points out that they've spent way more time apart than together. She starts venting about how she can't take it anymore, and in the heat of the moment, she accidentally says, "I love you." Greg thinks it's cute and says it back, though Claire is still acting a bit grumpy. Sometime later, Greg moves in with Claire. She tells him she convinced the university to let her do her research from home. Greg surprises her with a necklace made from a small artifact the skeleton was holding. Claire loves it, but she's also a little conflicted since he basically stole it from the lab. By the 2029 holidays, the couple is exhausted and falls asleep on New Year's Eve. They only wake up when the neighbors start celebrating at midnight. A very pregnant Claire wonders if they should move because the house feels stuck in the past, but Greg likes it there. Claire is nervous about applying for a professorship, so Greg suggests they just head to bed. She checks on their son first, worrying that the new job might take her away from the family too much.
Later, the family visits a museum where they see Thorne's flute on display. There's also Neanderthal art that looks exactly like him, implying the skeleton Claire studied was Thorne and her necklace belonged to Hara. The tour guide claims Neanderthals weren't very smart, but Claire and her son shut that down immediately, using the flute as proof. After the guide leaves, Claire tells her son how important it is to stay united, pointing out that Neanderthals and humans actually started families together. Now, we jump into the far future. A long-lived pilot named Clay wakes up on a high-tech spaceship. While working out, she chats with her AI co-pilot, Roscoe. She asks if they're there yet. Turns out they've been traveling for 210 years, and they still got 126 years to go. Clay tries to joke about it, but you can tell she's incredibly lonely. After doing some maintenance, Clay sits down for lunch. All the food is just pureed versions of normal meals. She talks to Roscoe about the ship's deceleration.
Roscoe tells her to leave the ship stuff to him and expresses concern about her mental health since she hasn't been sleeping. Clay goes to check on her plants. Roscoe confirms the plants are getting enough water, but a few minutes later, he warns her that the oxygen levels have dropped by 1%. Clay heads to the greenhouse and finds some of the plants are diseased. They have to disinfect everything and take samples to find the source. A few hours later, they've had to scrap 4.5% of their crops. Clay is devastated and asks Roscoe to tell her something, anything, nice. Roscoe cracks a joke to lighten the mood. While running tests, Clay asks about their failure margin. Roscoe explains that if they lose more than 6% of the plants, the mission is a bust. Clay laughs nervously at how doomed they are. They're already at 5% loss. Hours pass and things aren't getting better. Roscoe asks her what she thinks about death, but Clay shuts the conversation down. She tells Roscoe to cut all non-essential power to save oxygen. The lights go out, and Clay has to work by flashlight. Roscoe gets philosophical about the human mind, but stops when he gets an alert for an antiviral formula. They spray the plants, but unfortunately it doesn't work. Clay turns off the monitors, unable to look at the failing numbers. She realizes they don't know which plant started the virus, so she suggests getting rid of all of them and replanting once the air is clean. Roscoe points out that without the plants, there won't be enough oxygen for the human embryos they're carrying. Clay realizes that she's the one consuming 98% of the oxygen. She suggests sacrificing herself so Roscoe can take the babies to the new planet alone. Roscoe doesn't think an AI can raise children and wants to find another way. Roscoe comes up with a plan. They can move a backup greenhouse into the computer mainframe area. Using algae, they could pump oxygen directly into the life support. Clay points out that this would basically kill the AI's consciousness. Roscoe insists that the human survival is his top priority. They decide to run a simulation to see who was more likely to finish the mission. The next morning, Roscoe claims he can't run it because humans are too unpredictable. Clay doesn't buy it and forces him to show the results. It turns out Clay has a slightly better chance of success. She digs into the data and sees the difference is only 0.2%. There's a luck factor in her favor. Roscoe explains that human creativity and luck are things an AI just can't simulate. With no other choice, Clay grabs the manual to find out how to shut Roscoe down. She opens a panel and finds the mainframe. Roscoe points out the lever and promises it won't hurt. When she asks for his last words, he just asks her to take care of the kids. Clay cries, telling him he was her only friend before pulling the lever. The next morning, the silence is deafening. Despite the grief, she starts turning the computer room into a greenhouse. Within weeks, the plants are thriving and the oxygen is clean. Now she has to tackle the artificial wombs. It's incredibly complex, and her first attempt fails within hours. She refuses to give up, trying the experiment over and over. Finally, she succeeds and names the first baby V.
When V is older, Clay explains that Earth was dying and this ship was built to start over. She reveals that everyone's DNA was tweaked. The babies are designed to grow super fast to repopulate quickly, while Clay ages incredibly slowly to oversee the mission. Clay is the exception because humans realize that living forever is actually a curse.
The connections between the three eras become clear. Thorn taught the next generation fire. Claire passed down her knowledge and pushed Greg to be a better dad, like when they found those adult movies on the kid's tablet. Clay eventually has 2 more babies and teaches V how to care for them. They tend to the greenhouse together, and every time they enter, they say, "Thanks, Roscoe!" She also makes V run thousands of simulations a day, just in case. V hates them because they always end in failure, but Clay is firm. V needs to be ready to lead if Clay ever goes. Back in the past, Lark is giving birth. As the years pass, the necklace is handed down. One night, Thorn passes away peacefully by the fire. His family buries him, adding one last handprint to the wall and placing the necklace in his hand. In the modern day, Claire and Greg watch their grown-up son give a talk on elixir, a science to extend life. They leave the necklace for him with a note of support. On the way home, they agree they don't want to live forever. They feel that knowing life has an end is what gives it meaning. Eventually, Claire passes away from old age with her sons by her side. In the future, alarms go off as the ship finally lands on the new planet. Clay suits up to explore. Before she leaves, she gives the necklace to V, officially passing her the torch. The doors open, and Clay steps out into a world full of flowers. Years later, a new society has been built. V grew so fast that she actually dies of old age before Clay does. She is buried with the necklace. Clay returns to the ruins of the old ship and breaks down. No parent should have to outlive their child. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more recaps.